and we were quoting, well, I am going to quote now another West African scholar. This particular West African scholar is from Nigeria, and she is Yoruba, Anago, and she's written several books. My favorite, or the first book that I ever read by her, was The Invention of Women, Making African Sense of Western Gender Politics, I think maybe the subtitle, but I'm not sure. This author's name and West African scholar's name is Oyeronke Oyewumi. If you wanted to look her up, it's Oyeronke Oyewumi. And this is Theorizing African Motherhood. So you may just be able to look up this particular essay, although I found that much of what comes up when you just look it up under its title are just excerpts. And you really want to read the whole essay in order to get the full impact of what she is teaching. So this is another African scholar. The first scholar that I quoted was, of course, the illustrious Sheikh Anta Diaby Balaratcharoon, who is now an honored ancestor. And he is from the Wolof people of the West African country of Senegal. And this sister is of the Anago people, currently called Yoruba people, of the West African country of Nigeria. So I must say again, I am not giving a Western perspective on an African lifestyle. A lot of the times when you begin to speak of the matriarchies, when you begin to speak of women-centered society, when you begin to speak of matrifocal people, gynocentric people, then there are those people who consider themselves to be African-centered who want to say that you have been influenced by Western thought processes, who even want to accuse you of being in same-gender sexual relationships because you're referring to the truth of African society. So just let me say, I'm quoting African scholars who were raised in West Africa. And this is from their own perspective, how their societies were created and how their societies continue to be structured to the degree that they can within the neo-colonial context that they now exist. So this is an African perspective. We as an African people have to define ourselves. And these are two African scholars that are defining themselves outside of the Western context. So for those who may challenge me, this is not a Western societal way of thinking. These are African scholars coming from an African perspective. All right. So according to Oyeronke Oyewumi, centering Africans' experiences of motherhood reveal that motherhood is not merely an earthly institution. It is pre-gestational, pre-social, prenatal, postnatal, and lifelong. Precisely because there are no male equivalents of motherly responsibilities, motherhood transcends gender. Fatherhood is not its equivalent. As I have written elsewhere, mothers are not merely women. One cannot overemphasize the notion of pregestational motherhood. Its immediate impact is to deepen temporally and widen spatially the scope of the institution. The Yoruba world consists of the unborn, the living, and the dead, and motherhood is present in all of these realms. An aboyun, a pregnant woman, is understood to exist vicariously in two realms, the world of the unborn and that of the living. All spiritual and medicinal or herbal efforts made during the periods of gestation and parturition are designed to keep her firmly planted in the living world at the end of this life-transforming and indeed community-transforming process. Consequently, because the entire community is naturally invested in it, there is no greater public institution than motherhood. In earlier writings, I have made a case that dominant Western feminist accounts of motherhood reduce it to a gender category. Dominant Western feminist accounts of motherhood are what reduce it to a gender category. As such, mother is presented as a woman first and foremost, a category that is perceived to be subordinated, disadvantaged, and oppressed because women are subordinate to males who are the privileged group. The gendering of the institution of motherhood leads to its patriarchalization. In turn, because of the privileging of the males, reproductive processes like parturition, gestation, and childbirth, which have no male equivalent, are erased from feminist accounts of motherhood. Within this patriarchalizing model, motherhood cannot be understood in and of itself outside of the lens of women's oppression. With this approach, powerlessness and lack of agency attach by definition to motherhood. From an African perspective, what is troubling to many feminist theories of motherhood is that the mother's godlike power over the infant is not recognized as such. The mother's godlike power over the infant. According to, and this is me now, that was her quote, now this is me. According to African tradition, according to Anago tradition, the single most important decision that determines your destiny before you are born is the woman that you choose to mother you. That is what determines your destiny. That is the single most important decision that determines your destiny. And therefore, now I will quote the ancestors. This is coming straight from the annals of Anago history, which we call the Odu, which is our oral history, but also our holy scriptures, and it is passed from mouth to ear. And it says, Orisha bi ya kosi laye. Orisha bi ya kosi laye. There is no Orisha on earth like mother. There is no Orisha on earth like mother. Now I will go on to quote, and in the interest of time, I won't go and get this book. There is a book called Gelede by Margaret Thompson Drull. It is an account of the Gelede ritual that takes place still in Nigeria and has taken place since the beginning of Yoruba people, since the beginning of time from the perspective of our ancestors. This particular ritual, which no colonial impact was able to stop, which no Christian impact, no Muslim impact was able to stop. It continues to go on in the same way that it has since the beginning of time, and I'm going to tell you why people have not put this ritual down. This is the ritual that pays homage to the ancestral mothers, the Gelede, the ancestral mothers. And the people, when they are interviewed by this Western woman that wrote the book, says that if you do not pay homage to the ancestral mothers, then you will be destroyed. You cannot continue to exist. You will cease to exist. They said everything comes from the ancestral mothers. Even you. That's what they told the Western woman. Everything comes from the ancestral mothers. As such, they have the power to destroy anything. If they are not appeased, if they are not taken care of, we will cease to exist. And so the Gelede ritual continues until this day. African society, ancient majority people's understanding of life is matriarchal. This is not imbalanced. This is the ultimate imbalance. Understand yourself. Believe your eyes, believe your ears. Begin to live in reality. Stop living in thoughts and beliefs. Live in what you see and what you hear and what your body feels. The thoughts, the beliefs, the isms, the academies, the institutions, all of these things are pretenses. What do they exist on? Where is their foundation? Their foundation is just the ramblings of the madmen of Greco-Roman history. That's their foundation. It's based upon men who walked around and who did horrible, heinous acts to little boys and then spouted these thoughts. This is what these institutions are based upon. That's not reality. What can you see? What can you hear? What can you taste? What can you smell? What can you feel? These things are reality. When you begin to deal with those things, the senses that you were given to experience the physical realm, you will be living in reality. So from our ancestors' perspective, who were living in reality, life, existence is matriarchal, and all things spring forth from the ancestral mothers. All things. Existence is matriarchal. The universe is a matriarchal place. The universe and existence is taking place inside a womb. Everything that we know comes from a womb. Our scriptures, our body of scripture, that we quote in the Yoruba tradition, our oral history, is called the Odu. Odu is a term for womb. That is the womb of the memory of the mind of the Yoruba people, of the Anago people, the Odu. Everything exists. Everything is coming from a womb. All right. And I just want to make sure that everything is covered, so let me check my notes. Okay. So from that perspective, let's move forward with that matriarchal perspective. So what we have is an understanding, a seeing, and experiencing of existence as being matrifocal, and experiencing of existence as being gynocentric. It's coming from a mother. So it is not ancient. It is not African. It is not of majority people. It is not a reality to imagine that there is an abusive sky father watching over you and waiting for you to make a mistake so that he can punish you. We need to examine this concept. This is a concept that comes from the mind of abusers, and it comes from the mind of victims. Once you have been abused, you exist in a state of fear that someone or something or somebody will abuse you in that way again. So to conceive or perceive of the Most High, the Supreme Being, the life-giving force in the universe, of being this creature that sits off and waits for you to do something wrong and then destroys you for it, or kills you for it, or hurts you, or punishes you. This is obviously the deranged thought process of someone who was abused. This is how a person begins to walk through life, and how a person feels after they've been in an abusive situation. This is not a normal, natural thought process. No people who did not exist in a state of oppression and hurt and pain perceived of life that way, because that's not how life is. I'm a mother. Some of you watching may be parents. Do you sit back and watch your children, and when they do something wrong, do you then completely take away their life-giving apparatuses, anything that you've given them? No, you don't. You mete out a punishment, if it's necessary, that fits whatever it is that they did wrong. That's what you do. If they, for example, if you as a family were living in a wonderful, beautiful garden full of fruit-bearing trees, and everything that they needed was there in that garden, and everything that you all needed as a family, is there anything that your child could have done that would cause you to then banish them out into a barren wilderness? As a parent, the answer is going to be no. Obviously, when they get to be older, they're going to have to move to their own part of the garden. But who would banish their child from those things that produce life? It's not a normal thought process. It's not anything that we are doing as parents. Who as a parent would say, well, this child came and brought me fruits and vegetables to pay homage to me because they think I'm such a wonderful parent, and this child came and brought me meat to pay homage to me because they think I'm such a wonderful parent, and I'm going to choose one over the other? Who would do that? There's not a normal parent that would do that. This is not a normal thought process. This is the process of an abuser or a victim of abuse. And most abusers were victims of abuse. So it is the thought process of a victim of abuse. This is not an African way of thinking. If you are interested in reestablishing your full and total African self, you must purge yourself of the abusive sky daddy thought process and everything that comes with it. The universe is not resided over by an abusive sky daddy. If it was, we would have all been destroyed long ago. Because which one of us has not fallen short of the glory of that same abusive sky daddy? We would have all been destroyed long ago. but we're still here. The universe is a womb. If it is resided over, it is guided by a loving, life-giving mother. She manifests herself physically where we are now as the earth mother who gives us everything. There's nothing that we have that doesn't come from her. Even plastic, even computers, even electricity, all of this stuff emanates from the earth mother. She just gives it to us lovingly. And even when we pollute her, and even when we're digging in her and trying to suck her blood out to use it to fuel cars that will further pollute her, she keeps giving. This is the universe that you live in. This is the understanding that our ancestors felt, lived, and experienced of the universe. This is the African experience of life. A life-giving, life-maintaining mother. Full of love, full of empathy, constantly patient and constantly forgiving. The way that every mother seeks to be with her children. This is the same way that Mama Universe, Mama Earth, the goddess, the great goddess, the ancestral mothers, this is the same thing that they're doing with us. Constantly, all the time. Look at life and you will see that this is true. And with that understanding, we can stop going through life thinking that we're being punished, or thinking that someone is testing us, or thinking that someone is waiting for us to make a mistake. That's not what the Supreme Being is doing. That's not what the universe is doing. That's not what the ancestral mothers are doing. They're guiding you lovingly along, and they want to give you everything that you need to make this journey as simple and as easy as possible. And I know that when that is shared, then our next thought has to be, well then, where does wickedness come in? Where does evilness come in? Well, wickedness and evil are the natural, normal reactions of those people who have been treated wickedly and evilly. If people have been treated with love and with kindness, then they will treat you lovingly and kindly. The biggest reason for wickedness on Earth Mother right now, and our ancestors called her Onile, so I usually call her Earth Mother Onile. We pay homage to her, from which all things come, I share. But the biggest reason for wickedness in this mind right now is that all of the resources are locked up. The resources that we need to live life fully, the resources that we need to eat and to bathe and to clothe are being held by a very wicked minority. If the resources were unlocked, the majority of evil that we experience on a day-to-day basis would not be happening. Because people would not need to steal. People would not need to feel, as Bob said, when you want to get some food, your brother has to be your enemy. He said through political strategy, they keep us hungry. And when you want to get some food, your brother has to be your enemy. That's capitalism. So we wouldn't feel that we were in competition with our brethren or with our sistren if the resources weren't locked up. Earth Mother herself does not lock up the resources. She gives freely of the water to anyone who is there to gather it. She gives freely of fruits and vegetables to anyone who is there to gather them. Those are the things that we need to eat. There are free. She gives freely of all of the materials that we would need to create shelter and clothing. Those things are just given freely by Earth Mother. So it is not the natural order of things for resources to be locked up. That is wicked by itself, at its base, at its foundation. That's wicked. And so because we are all victims of that particular wickedness, then you see the evil that comes from people being treated evilly. But we are not inherently wicked. No, that is not the nature of any yon. That is not the nature of those chosen to be born. And as a matter of fact, according to our ancestors, as I discussed in an earlier video, you are chosen to be born. Your spirit is chosen to come into the physical realm because of your love for good character and the way that you want to strive for good character. If you were not a person that wanted to strive for good character, you would not have been chosen to be born. And you can be sure of that. Come here, yes. Yes, Newbie. Nubia? Yes, Nubia? Okay. My own motherhood process. You know, you guys are welcome to look up on it. So we exist within a womb universe. And when I first deeply experienced that epiphany, it was such a beautiful moment of clarity and love. I came into African centered thought in the summer of 1989. I had a very good friend. His name was Alex. He was from Memphis. He has passed on and become an ancestor, even though he was younger than me, passed on in a car accident, so I pay homage to him. But my friend Alex was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it filled him with such a fire that he began to share it with all of us who were his close friends. And we were all, at that time, undergraduate students. He was a student at Vanderbilt University, and I was a student at Fisk University. And so we were seeking at that time to become members of, the black bourgeoisie. This was the goal of our lives at that time. And it was a goal that had been given to us by our mothers because, of course, we were all coming from the poverty of the southern United States African experience. If you're born black or born African in the southern United States, there's a particular type of poverty that you experience growing up. And if you have a good mother, I won't even put that in quotes because I had a good mother, Ibarra Taroon, and she pushes you towards education because she doesn't want you to continue to remain in this type of poverty. So we had all been pushed. And we read the autobiography of Malcolm X as a collective, the summer of 1989. The movie Do the Right Thing came out, P.E., Public Enemy had all these wonderful songs. But we became a very strong part of that movement. That was the beginning of my African-centered thought. As Shu would have it, as fate would have it, as my destiny, as I chose it would have it, the next fall, I became pregnant with my first child. And after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, I stopped relaxing my hair. I began to study with the Nation of Islam. And I was moving towards becoming as African as I possibly could. And then I am given the news that I'm pregnant. And so this, for me, catapulted me forward. It pushed me forward in a very, very strong way. Because I didn't want my baby to come into this world and see me with straight hair or be hearing people call me a European name or see me practicing a European spiritual tradition. I didn't want her to be exposed to anything that wasn't true for her in this incarnation in which she would be African. And so I began to do everything, more fervently. And this was, I began to walk the path of African-centered thought as much as I could at that time. So that was the beginning for me. But maybe a couple of years, 3 years thereafter, I was introduced to the Imago tradition. I had been praying. I saw that the Nation of Islam was not African from my perspective. And I had been praying for an actual African tradition to practice. So I was